Remember a while back I made a video talking about NASA's image of the Orion Nebula, and I said I could tell just by looking at it that it had probably hundreds of photos stacked together and then photoshopped and color enhanced to get this result. Well, I have proof, and it comes straight from NASA's website. You can go on nasa.gov and find this information for yourself. And by the way, they call it a composite image. They don't even call it a real photo. Now, when they tell you that this image was taken by Hubble Space Telescope, that's a lie. And I found proof of that as well. You guys are going to want to stick around for this one. And before we go any further, I'm not saying that the Orion Nebula does not exist. It just isn't what they say it is. This is not the result of a star that exploded, and it's not a star nursery. I'm simply saying that this image was created using ground telescopes and various filters to get these different colors. And more than likely, lots of photoshopping as well. And in fact, they admit that themselves. Let's move to the article. All right, now let's read the highlighted passage, shall we? This stunning Hubble image offers the sharpest view of the Orion Nebula ever obtained. That's debatable. Created using 520 different Hubble exposures. They're saying they stacked 520 long exposure photos together to create this image. Now, if they've got a telescope 1,000,000 miles out in space or thereabouts, way out beyond our atmosphere, why do they need to stack 520 long exposures together to show us a decent image? I mean, you would think with this multi-billion-dollar space telescope, they should be able to get right up on top of that thing and snap us some nice photos. But that's not the case. Okay, let's read on. 520 different Hubble exposures taken in multiple wavelengths of light, which is basically saying using multiple colored filters. This mosaic contains over 1 billion pixels. And the reason it contains 1 billion pixels is because they stack so daggone many photos together. But wait, it gets even better. Hubble imaged most of the nebula, but ground-based images were used to fill in the gaps. Ground-based images. That means those images were captured from ground telescopes to fill in its gaps in observations. Now let's use some critical thinking, okay? Because I know some of you really hate to do that and it really pains you, but let's think for a minute. Why would they need to use ground-based telescopes to fill in any gaps in observations when they've got a multi-billion-dollar telescopes flying around outer space taking pictures? Doesn't make any sense, does it? This is just their way of telling you the truth without telling you. Any astrophotographer that has worked with stacking software will tell you there's no way possible that they got the space telescope photos to align with the ground telescope photos. You see, the angle of the viewpoint would have been way off. The way it was framed would not be exactly the same, and the distance that the stars were away from each other would not align either. And this stacking software that astrophotographers used, because I've used it, I'm familiar with it. If every single exposure isn't the exact same same ISO, with the object centered the exact same way, perfect focus in every single photo, it's gonna really throw off your final image, and it's gonna be a mess. In fact, I've had it at times where my alignment wasn't right and the object wasn't centered perfectly or centered the same in all of my photos. I've had the software kick it out and it wouldn't even stack it for me because it couldn't do an alignment. So you see, there is no possible way that they could have aligned and layered the Hubble Space Telescope photos on top of the ground photos. It's just no possible way. And the real reason they had to use 520 different exposures and stack them all together is to convince you that that image was taken with a space telescope. Because they've got to show you, this out of the world, highly detailed, almost 3D, jaw-dropping image, right? To sell you on the idea that they actually have space telescopes floating around out there taking pictures. But they obviously do not, or they would not need to fill in any gaps in observations using ground telescopes. And least of all, they wouldn't need to stack 520 exposures together to show us these images. Now here's the strange part. I've recently been photographing the Orion Nebula a lot because I find it fascinating, and to me it's also interesting. If you read up here, the Mayan culture, they had a thing with the Orion Nebula. And since we're told they didn't even have telescopes back then, and NASA calls this a deep space object, how in the world did they even know the Orion Nebula existed? How would they know that? We're told they didn't have telescopes, and you cannot see the nebula with your naked eye. In fact, to the naked eye, it just looks like a tiny, blurry little star, if the skies are even clear enough to see it. But at best, it just looks like a star to the unaided eye. But anyways, I just showed you their image, and they stacked 520 exposures together to get that result. Let me show you what I can do just stacking 40 images together. Check this out. Now, I'm going to show you probably 4 or 5 different images that I've created of the Orion Nebula. Some of them I only stacked 30 photos together. Some of them I stacked 40, but 40 was the max. Okay, so this is my most recent stacked image of the Orion Nebula. All I used was 40 30-second exposures to create this image. Now, if you'll examine this image closely, you'll see that I picked up pretty much all of the same details that they did with a multi-billion-dollar space telescope. I don't think so. The reality is their images were captured from the ground, and so were mine, and that's why they look so similar. Now here's another one, and if you notice, the color temperature is just a little bit different in this one. I was playing around with the color temperature a little bit, just seeing what would make it look the best and bring out the most detail. Now this one was taken at a slightly different angle, as you can see by the nebula at the top. Okay, now this one, I only stacked 30 long exposures together to create this image. Still looks pretty dang good. And here's another one. This is a 30 photo stack. A little bit different color temperature. I can't decide which one I like best, but they all look pretty cool. But anyways, why are we paying them billions and billions of dollars for something that amateur astrophotographers like myself can do for free? Think about it.